Last time we installed Microsoft Visual Studio, created a simple Hello World program which used console.readline to get something from the keyboard. We stored it in a variable, either a string or an integer, and then we output our text using console.writeline. Today we're just going to have a quick look at making our code loop. There are two ways of looping. One is called count controlled, one is called condition controlled. Let's start off with count controlled. I'm going to put a comment line in, which is a double slash, and I'm going to say this is count controlled iteration. There's a very technical way of saying we're going to loop around a certain number of times. We use something called a for loop. Now in a for loop, it says how many times you want to go around. Well, let's just go around, say, 5 times. First, we're going to create a little variable, traditionally called I, which starts off at the value of 1. And I is going to loop around while we're less than the value of 5. And each time around the loop, we're going to add 1 on. Now this is actually going to loop around with I of a value of 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and then while it's less than 5 it loops, so therefore it stops. This loop actually loops around 4 times. Now if we wanted to loop around 5 times, we could either change that to a 6, or you put an equal sign in. And now it will do it while I is equal to 5. So this will loop around 5 times. Now we're just going to put something to happen in here. So we're going to have console.writeline, and actually we'll just print out what the value of I is, just to check it is correct. I run the program, and yes, it does print out 1 to 5. It does it 5 times. Now it might be a little bit more useful for us to have a program, rather than just listing the numbers 1 to 5, does something else. Now I think we could do a times table program. Now, if you think of times tables, we usually go 1 to 12. So therefore, we just change that to a 12. Let's just check that does what we expect. 1 to 12. That's great. We're going to change our console.writeline. At the moment, we're just outputting the variable. Now remember, last time we output some text as a string, and then we used a variable. So this will actually do exactly the same. But I want to say it's the number times, and let's do the 5 times table. And let's see what happens now. It's looking a bit more like a times table now. It's outputting first variable, I, then an x, then a 5, then an equals. Now we want to have the answer. So if we want to click on the answer as well, we need to actually have an answer variable. Now I'm just going to put it as position 1, which is the second variable because it starts at 0, remember. And this second one is going to be I times 5. We can actually do the calculation in that section of our console.writeline. Let's run the program again and see if it's worked. So this time, yes, it has given us the 5 times table. Now something that would be even better to do would be actually to get the value from the user. So let's have another variable called num, short for number. We're going to get a value from the keyboard, which is a console.readline. But if you remember, that's a string variable. We're trying to store it as an integer. So we need to do a convert int32 so it can be stored correctly. Now this is the times table number we're using. So therefore, instead of timesing by 5, we're going to times it by our value num. It might also be nice to actually tell the user to enter a value. So we're going to say console.writeline, please enter a number. Now there is one little mistake we've got in this program. I'll run it and see if you can spot what's going to go wrong. I'll enter 2 as a 2 times table. Now it's taken 2 in. It's used 2 for the 2 times table, but it's still actually printed the number 5, hasn't it? That's because we actually just typed in the number 5 there. So we're going to need another variable. Now this one is going to be in position 2, which is the third one along. Doesn't matter what the ordering, but it's the variable num. So it's going to say the first variable, which is I, or position 2, which is the third variable num, and it equals the one in position 1, which is the second variable I times num. It's a bit confusing starting from 0, but computers love counting from 0. If we run our program now, again I'll do the 2 times table again, and there you can see it works correctly. Now this type of looping, called count controlled iteration, works brilliantly when you need to loop a certain number of times. But you might want to loop around until somebody's typed in a certain keyword, or you might want to loop around until they've got a password correct, and you don't know how many times you're going to loop around. This is called condition controlled iteration. Just realised I put an N there, sorry. We're going to loop around while a condition is true. This condition can be a boolean, such as while active equals true, or it can be something integer based, like while lives is greater than 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop around doing a times table again, and I'm going to go up to a certain number. So we've still got our num here, so I'm going to reuse that one. I'm going to say while j is less than 13. Now we don't know what j is yet. J is an integer, and it's going to start off with a value of 1. And each time around my loop, I'm going to add 1 onto j. So it should loop around, hopefully, 12 times, just like the one we've got at the top. And what I'm going to actually do, just to save some code, we're going to do exactly the same piece of code, only instead of I, we're now using a j variable. And I'm hoping this section of code will do exactly the same as the one above. So it should actually do the same thing. Let's try it out. I'm going to enter the number 3 for the 3 times table. And as you can see, it has printed out the 3 times table correctly for our first loop, which we knew worked, and then is actually printed out exactly the same again for our second loop. So these 2 loops are doing exactly the same thing. It's up to you which one you prefer to use. Some people quite like using while loops. Again, with our while loop, if it makes it a little bit easier to read, it's going around 12 times. You could make that less than or equal to 12. And if we run it again, it should still do exactly the same. So I do the 2 times table, goes up to the answer 24, and again up to the answer 24. So you can see that both sections of code are exactly the same. Flexibility here is that, yes, this doesn't have to be just things like j less than 12. It can be while password is incorrect, and you can ask the person for a username and password and keep looping around until they get it right, and you don't know how many loops that's going to be. So condition controlled has its uses, but yes, you can do effectively count controlled ones as well using a while loop. So those are the 2 main ways of looping around. Next time I think we're going to try and look at arrays, which is a different type of data type.